Okay, in this video we're going to do the trig problems in the review for 3.1.3.2. So our first one is a product rule. So we're going to say f prime x equals left d right. Okay, the derivative of cosecant 3x is negative cosecant 3x times cotan 3x times the derivative of the angle, which is 3. Okay, so I'm just going to preemptively get rid of this problem so that we can extend. Okay, so far I've done left d right. So now it's plus right cosecant 3x d left. Okay, that's going to be cosine 2x times 2. Okay, and just to clarify, that says cosine, C-O-S. Okay, so now let's see if we can clean things up a little bit. So you want to be really careful with that negative sign because you're going to pull it in front. So it's in front, that took care of the negative, bring the 3 in, and then you have sine 2x cosecant 3x cotan 3x. Okay, plus, bring the 2 in front, cosecant 3x cosine 2x. Okay, so the only thing you can factor out really is a cosecant, because that appears both places. So bring the cosecant 3x to the front, and then in your bracket you're going to have negative 3 sine 2x cotan 3x, and then plus 2 cosine 2x, and that should pretty much do it. Okay, so just looking over it, everything looks good. I have my angles, I have my proper signs, and we are good to go. So let's go on to question 22. Okay, in 22, I'm going to say f prime x. It's a quotient rule, so it's going to be low, d high. So be very careful. So you're going to first do the power rule, which means bring the 2 down, secant 5x. Okay, now take the derivative of secant 5x, and the derivative of secant 5x is secant 5x times what? Times tan 5x, and then the derivative of the angle is times 5. So that's just low d high. Minus high, which is secant squared 5x, d low, which is secant squared 3x times 3, and then all over tan squared 3x. Okay, so let's clean this up. F prime of x, looking at the whole continuum, I see that I have a secant squared 5x in common. So do you see how these together make secant squared 5x? And I already have a secant squared 5x right over here. So let's factor out any numbers in common. I think the answer is no. So I'm going to factor out a secant squared 5x, and then to get the numerator back, I need a couple of things still. Okay, so I need a 2 and a 5, which is a 10. Then I need tan 3x, and I need tan 5x. Okay, that gets the first term back. Minus, I pulled out the secant squared 5x, so I need the 3 in front, and just the secant squared 3x, close your bracket, all over tan squared 3x. Okay, so let me just look that over, make sure it all looks good. So let me just look at that for a sec. Okay, that looks good, so let's go on to 23 on the next page. Okay, so here's a product rule with trig functions again. So we're going to have f prime of x equals left d right. So the derivative of cotan is negative cosecant squared 3x and then times the angle. Plus, so we've done left d right plus right d left. So that's going to end up being a negative, which I'm putting up here, sine 2x times the 2. Okay, clean up time. Bring the negative in front, bring the 3 in front. I have a cosecant squared 3x and a cosine 2x. The positive becomes a negative because of the negative sign, and right here. And then we have a 2 in front and cotan 3x sine 2x. Okay, so let's just look at that. Make sure all of that looks good. Okay, so let me just look at that. Okay, so now what we have to do, we have to not only get an answer, but we have to evaluate the answer where x is pi over 6. So that means down here, I'm going to do my little baby unit circle. Okay, so here's my unit circle, and I really just need a couple of angles. So the first angle is pi over 6, and that's going to be 1/2 and then root 3 over 2. The next one is pi over 4, root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2, and I don't think I ever use anything else, so I think that's good. Okay, so now what we're going to do is this. Let's first plug in this angle and see what that looks like. Okay, so I have -3. Now, let's think about this. Okay, cosecant squared is 1 over sine squared. Okay, we're just going to make our lives easy. So this is 1 over sine squared. If we put in a pi over 12, 3 times pi over 12 is pi over 4. Okay, so I have that. Okay, so then the next one times cosine 2 times pi over 12 is pi over 6. Okay, so that has an angle now. Minus 2 times cotan 3 times pi over 12 is pi over 4. But cotan I can write how? Can't I write that as cosine over sine? So this, I'm going to put sine pi over 4, and I'm going to change that to cosine pi over 4, because cosine over sine is cotan. Okay, so when I have my angle, then I have to multiply that by sine of 2x, which is going to be sine of pi over 6. Okay, so now we're ready to plug in. -3. Okay, pi over 4, the sine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. Square that, you get 2 over 4, which is 1/2. 1 over 1/2 is 2. Okay, so think about that. Then I have cosine pi over 6, that's the smallest angle, so that's going to be root 3 over 2. Minus, okay, cosine of pi over 4 and the sine of pi over 4 is the same, so therefore cosine over sine is going to be 1. So minus 2. Sine of pi over 6 is the second value, so that's going to be 1/2. Okay, so let's see what we get. So these 2's can cancel, these 2's can cancel, and I end up with -3 root 3 minus 1. Okay, that's an exact answer. Anything else you give me is going to be an approximation. So you want to be able to work with your unit circle values to get the exact answer. So we're going to do one more of those with number 24. Let's do that next. Okay, here we go. Last trig problem. F prime of x equals low d high. So that's going to be 2 times sine 2x. The derivative of sine 2x is cosine 2x times 2. And then minus, so that was low d high, minus high d low. So I have sine squared 2x. So the derivative of cosine is negative sine 3x times 3, all over cosine squared 3x. Okay, so let's start maybe writing a little smaller and cleaning things up. Okay, so I see that I have some things in common. I believe I have a sine 2x in common. So let's factor out a sine 2x. That leaves me with a cosine 3x. Let me put a 4 in front of there. So let me just back up. I'm going to erase that. And let's put the number 4 from here. So this is going to be a 4. And then I will do what? Cosine 3x. And then I have a cosine 2x. Okay, good. All right, so that's good. And then let's continue. Okay, a negative and a negative makes this a positive. I factored out a sine 2x. I have a 3 left. I have a sine 2x left. And I also have a sine 3x. That's done. And that's all over cosine squared 3x. Okay, so the nice thing about this is I don't have any trig functions other than cosine and sine, so it's going to be easy to substitute things in. Okay, once again, let's just look at the little unit circle, and I know 1, 2, 3. I know the bottom is 1/2 root 3 over 2 over 2 root 2 over 2, and this one is 1/2 and then root 3 over 2. So I've kind of written it in there really tiny. So let's see if we can plug in. So now I want f prime of pi over 12, and I want the exact answer. So sine 2x, that's sine of pi over 6. The sine of pi over 6 is going to be the second value for the lowest angle, so that is going to be 1/2. Okay, so then, now I have a 4, and cosine of 3x is the cosine of, let's see, pi over 4, right? So cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. The cosine of 2x is the cosine of pi over 6, and that is root 3 over 2. All right, plus, then we have 3 times the sine of 2x. We previously said the very first term was 1/2. The sine of 3x is the sine of pi over 4, which is root 2 over 2. Okay, all of that is over the sine of 3x, which is the sine of pi over 4, the cosine of pi over 4, which is root 2 over 2, and because it's squared, we have to square it. Okay, so let's see if we can get rid of some numbers here. So I'm going to change color so it's easier to see. Okay, look at that. 4 and the 2 2's can cancel. All right, so that's all I'm going to cancel, I believe. So I'll change my color to blue. Okay, so now what am I going to do? I have radical 2. Well, we'll keep the 1/2 out here, and then we will say radical 2 times radical 3 is radical 6 plus, so I have 3 root 2 over 4, okay, and then this whole thing is divided by root 2 over 2 squared, so that's 2 over 4, which is also 1/2. Okay, so now these 1/2s can cancel, and I am left with, so this is the whole thing's gonna equal root 6 plus 3/4 root 2. And that is your exact answer. Okay, and that finishes the review. So you really need to spend time doing this carefully. See if you can write carefully so that you can read your writing. All my talking aloud you should be doing in your head, because you have to try to keep track of this. Okay, I think you'd have a hard time having side conversations or listening to music while doing, especially these last 2 problems, because you have to keep your head in the game the whole time. You may always ask for extra paper. You want a test or some kind of an assessment, because the neater you can write things and the more spread out so that you can really see what's going on, the better. And just like I paused the video and looked to make sure everything was correct, I want to suggest that you do that as well. Okay, don't rush ahead to check the answer. Just see if you can be systematic, and then you will be successful.